In Singapore and Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, we have kind of these what they call expatriate wards or expatriate branches, expat for short. And what that basically is just these communities of people who are often from America or Australia or Canada that have come to Malaysia or Singapore because of their job. And I guess what usually happens, kind of the typical scenario is, someone will be working at their company in America and the company says, hey, we have an opportunity in Kuala Lumpur for you or in Singapore for you. If you choose to accept this post and go to Malaysia to work for 2 years, and the position is the regional supervisor for Asia or some other capacity like that. If you go, we'll pay to send all of your kids to private school. We will increase your salary by 150% and we'll pay for all of your moving expenses, and we'll give you a bunch of other benefits basically as compensation for the inconvenience that you incur by moving to the other side of the globe to work for a couple of years. And so a lot of people say, yeah, it sounds like great international experience, a great boost in my career, so I'll do it. And so when you serve in Singapore and Malaysia, you might have the opportunity to serve in one of these expatriate wards or branches where there's basically just a bunch of individuals that have had opportunities in Singapore or Malaysia to take a job there, usually with the same company that they're working with, in America. They just send them over here for a temporary position, and it depends on the company what the benefits are of doing that. A lot of them pay for the schooling at very good private schools, and those there's a Singapore American school. It's a very good school. It's also a Kuala Lumpur international school, I think, where a lot of members send their kids. The expatriate lifestyle is kind of like that. A lot of things get paid for by the company. It has challenges involved too. You can imagine that for a lot of families, it's difficult to up and leave America and raise your kids in Singapore for a couple of years. There's cultural challenges. You maybe don't get all of the foods that you're used to back in America. And so for some members, expatriates, expats, it's difficult, but some really love it, love living in Malaysia and Singapore. And so, yeah, so that's just kind of the expat story. It's usually just, a couple years of an assignment. There's only a handful of families that are American or Australian that are living in Singapore and Malaysia permanently. That's not as common as people who are just coming in for, a 2 or 3 year assignment with their company. When I was in East Malaysia, actually, in Miri, there was a guy who moved into the ward. He was American. He married a Malaysian, and he was actually a web developer. And so that was his business, and which of course was all online. And so he was living actually in the country of Brunei, which borders Malaysia. It's right next to the city where I was serving. And so he was able to get by on a relatively low amount of money because the cost of living was a lot cheaper in this part of Brunei that he was living in. And he would, so he had his business, and so he was able to live there comfortably on a very low salary, and he was, kind of a web entrepreneur, and he was able to do that. I don't know how it went for him because he moved in, and not long after that, I think just like a month or so after that, I got transferred out. So I don't know if he's still there, maybe. But it seemed like a pretty smart idea to me. One thing in Singapore is where we have a stake, and we have 10 wards, and 2 of them are expatriate wards. I heard a rumor once, I don't know if this is true, hearsay, but they said that at one point in the past, they used to have integration between the expatriate wards and kind of the local wards. They didn't differentiate expat versus local. But I think, and I mean, this isn't just because it's Singapore. This is probably something that would happen anywhere. Any kind of a situation where you have, on the one hand, people who have probably been members of the church their whole life, they know all the rules in the Handbook 1 and Handbook 2, and they know how the church is supposed to be functioning, in Relief Society meetings and how everything's supposed to be, because maybe they grew up in Utah and they're very used to that, versus people who are relatively more new to the church. There was rumors, there was some conflict between kind of the people that knew how things were supposed to be running in a ward and people who were more new to it, basically. And so according to a rumor I heard, at some point there was a little bit of tension, and they decided to kind of separate things and say, okay, we'll have all of the people who think they know what they're doing because they're from Utah, and they know how everything should be run and needs to be run in one ward, and we'll have the other people in another ward. But that was hearsay, and I think that, I didn't see any real tension there between the expatriates and the members. But in Singapore too, a lot of the members who are Singaporean are doing just as well, if not better, than some of their expatriate counterparts. Because again, Singapore, we remember, is a very economically prosperous city. 1 out of every 5 people is a millionaire, and so there are some members, Singaporean members, who are very well to do. And so I didn't see any tension in Singapore between the expatriates and the local members.